The city lights blurred together as Nathan Pierce stared through the rain-streaked window of Riverside Café. At 38, he had built an empire. Pierce Capital Management controlled billions, and his name appeared regularly in financial magazines. His office occupied 3 floors of a downtown skyscraper. He owned properties in 5 countries. Yet sitting in this small cafe at 11:30 on a Wednesday night, he felt hollow. The cafe occupied a corner building that had weathered decades of change. Exposed brick walls held vintage photographs of the neighborhood from better times. Mismatched furniture gave the place character that expensive restaurants could never replicate. A handful of customers scattered across tables, each lost in their own world. The coffee maker hissed softly behind the counter, competing with gentle acoustic music from hidden speakers. Nathan came here often now, always after 10, always alone. His penthouse apartment felt too large, too quiet. The office felt suffocating. This cafe existed somewhere between those worlds, a neutral space where he could simply be nobody for an hour. He wore a tailored charcoal suit despite the late hour, having come straight from another dinner meeting. His dark hair showed hints of early gray at the temples. Exhaustion marked his face in ways that sleep never quite erased. A cup of black coffee sat before him, forgotten and cooling. The door chimed softly. Nathan glanced up out of habit, then returned his gaze to the rain. But something made him look again. A woman had entered, shaking droplets from her worn jacket. She looked about 30, slender, with chestnut hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform was simple, black pants and a white shirt with the cafe's small logo embroidered on the pocket. She moved with efficiency, born from necessity, not enthusiasm. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but she smiled at customers with genuine warmth. This was Claire Bennett, though Nathan did not know her name yet. She worked the late shift 3 nights a week, one of several jobs that filled her waking hours. Claire made her way behind the counter, exchanging brief words with the older man who had been managing the floor. He looked relieved to see her, quickly gathering his things. She tied an apron around her waist and began wiping down the espresso machine, her movements practiced and quick. Nathan watched without meaning to. There was something about the way she moved, a quiet determination that spoke of deeper struggles. She was not just tired from one long day. This was the tiredness of someone who had been running on empty for months, maybe years. 20 minutes passed. Customers came and went. Claire served them efficiently, clearing tables, restocking supplies. She never stopped moving, as if stillness might let exhaustion catch up with her. When she approached Nathan's table, he had not touched his coffee. She paused, noticing. "Can I get you something fresh?" Her voice was soft, considerate. Nathan looked up at her, really looked. Her face held a kind of lived experience that was impossible to fake. Fine lines creased the corners of her eyes. Her hands showed signs of hard work, nails trimmed short, skin slightly rough. But her eyes were what struck him most. They held sadness, yes, but also resilience. "No, thank you," he said quietly. Claire nodded and turned to leave, but then she stopped. She looked at him again, and something in her expression shifted. Recognition, perhaps, though not of who he was, recognition of something familiar. "You look tired," she said softly, "like my husband did before he passed." The words hung in the air between them. Nathan froze, his breath catching. It was not accusation or judgment, it was observation, delivered with the kind of honesty that only comes from genuine concern. "I'm sorry," Claire added quickly, color rising in her cheeks. "That was inappropriate. I should not have said that." Nathan raised a hand gently. "No, please, don't apologize." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, 2 strangers connected by words that cut through all pretense. In that instant, Nathan saw himself reflected in her concern. How many people in his life would notice if he was carrying too much?
How many would care enough to say something? Claire shifted her weight, unsure whether to stay or go. Nathan found himself not wanting her to leave. "Did he?" Nathan asked quietly. "Your husband, did he find whatever he was looking for?" The question seemed to surprise Claire. Her expression softened into something sadder. "No, he died still searching for it. He worked himself into the ground trying to give us everything. In the end, all I wanted was more time with him." Nathan felt something crack inside his chest. How many times had he canceled plans, missed events, sacrificed relationships for one more deal, one more acquisition? He was chasing something he could never quite reach, and in the process, he was losing himself. "What about you?" he found himself asking. "Are you still searching?" Claire smiled, but it held no joy. "I stopped searching. Now I just survive, one day at a time, one job at a time. My daughter needs me present, not perfect." She said it simply, as if it was the most obvious truth in the world. Nathan realized he had forgotten what that looked like, being present, actually living instead of just existing between obligations. Claire excused herself to help another customer. Nathan sat alone with his cold coffee and her words echoing in his mind. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside, something had shifted. He did not know it yet, but this moment would become the line between his old life and whatever came next. When Nathan finally stood to leave an hour later, he left cash on the table, far more than the coffee cost. As he walked toward the door, he glanced back. Claire was wiping down tables, still moving, still working, but for just a moment their eyes met again. She gave him a small nod, and he returned it. The rain felt different on his face as he stepped outside. Colder, more real. Everything felt more real.
The alarm buzzed at 4:30 in the morning. Claire's hand shot out from under the thin blanket, silencing it before the sound could wake Sophie. The apartment was dark and cold. The heating system worked sporadically, and this was not one of its cooperative mornings. Claire sat up slowly, her body protesting. Every muscle ached from yesterday's work. She had cleaned hotel rooms from 6 until noon, delivered groceries from 1 until 5, and worked the cafe shift until nearly 2 in the morning. 4 hours of sleep felt like luxury these days. She moved quietly through the small apartment, careful not to disturb her daughter. The place was modest, just 2 rooms and an older building where the wallpaper peeled and the pipes made strange noises. But it was theirs, and Claire kept it spotlessly clean despite having so little time. In the bathroom, she splashed cold water on her face and pulled her hair back. The mirror showed a woman who looked older than 32. When had those lines appeared around her eyes? When had her cheeks become so hollow? She barely recognized herself anymore. The photograph on the narrow shelf caught her attention, as it did every morning. Thomas smiled at the camera, his arm around a younger, happier version of Claire. They stood in front of their first apartment, back when the future seemed full of possibility. He had been a construction worker with big dreams. She had been finishing nursing school. Then Sophie came along, beautiful and unexpected, and everything changed. Thomas had worked harder, taken on extra shifts, pushed himself beyond limits. He wanted to provide everything, but his body could not sustain the pace. The heart attack came on a job site one Tuesday afternoon. He was 34 years old. That was 2 years ago. Since then, Claire had been running, trying to fill the gap he left behind. The medical bills from his final days, the funeral costs, the rent that never stopped coming due. Her nursing degree sat unfinished because she could not afford to complete it while working enough to survive. "Mommy?" A small voice came from the bedroom. Claire turned to find Sophie standing in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. At 7 years old, she looked so much like Thomas it sometimes hurt to look at her. The same dark curls, the same thoughtful eyes. "Hey, sweetheart, did I wake you?" Sophie shook her head. "I heard the rain stop. Is it morning?" "Almost. Go back to sleep, baby. Mrs. Chen will be here at 7 to take you to school." "Will you be home for dinner?" The question pierced Claire's heart. She crouched down, pulling Sophie into a hug.
"Not tonight, sweet girl, but Saturday we will have the whole day together, just us, I promise." Sophie nodded against her shoulder, accepting this reality with the resignation of a child who had learned not to expect too much. Claire held her tighter, fighting back tears. This was not the childhood she wanted for her daughter, but it was all she could manage right now. After settling Sophie back in bed, Claire grabbed her bag and headed out into the pre-dawn darkness. The streets were nearly empty. A few other early workers moved like shadows toward their destinations. Claire walked quickly, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The hotel where she cleaned was 8 blocks away. She arrived at 5:45, changed into her uniform and began her rounds. Room after room, scrubbing toilets, changing sheets, vacuuming floors. The work was mindless, which sometimes helped. Other times, like today, it gave her too much space to think. She thought about the man from the cafe last night. Something about him had struck her immediately. The emptiness in his eyes despite his expensive clothes. The way he sat so still, as if movement required too much energy. She recognized that exhaustion because she saw it in Thomas during those final months. The words came out before she could stop them. Inappropriate, unprofessional, but true. She hoped she had not offended him, hoped maybe, somehow, her words might matter. By 11:30, her shift ended. Claire changed back into street clothes and headed downtown for her afternoon work. The grocery delivery app connected her with customers needing food brought to their homes. She had learned the fastest routes, the buildings with working elevators, which neighborhoods tipped well. The work kept her moving through the city, upstairs, down streets, across parks. Her phone directed her from one address to the next. She smiled at customers, thanked them for tips, and tried not to think about how her feet throbbed in her worn sneakers. At 3:15, while delivering organic produce to a brownstone in the financial district, Claire passed the gleaming tower that housed Pierce Capital Management. She barely glanced at it, too focused on finding the correct address. She did not see Nathan standing at his office window 40 floors up, looking down at the street below. Nathan had been distracted all day. Meetings blurred together, reports sat unread on his desk. His assistant had asked twice if he was feeling well. He was not sick, just unsettled. The conversation from last night replayed in his mind on a loop. Like my husband did before he passed, he worked himself into the ground trying to give us everything. All I wanted was more time with him. Nathan had built his entire life around achievement. More money, more deals, more success. But what was he building it for? He had no family waiting at home, no close friends who knew anything real about him. His parents had passed years ago. His brother lived overseas and they spoke perhaps twice a year. When had he become so isolated? When had winning become more important than living? His phone buzzed with another message from his assistant. The board meeting was starting in 5 minutes. Nathan grabbed his jacket and headed to the conference room, pushing the questions aside. There was always more work to do. But that evening, instead of staying late as usual, Nathan left the office at 6. He walked rather than taking his car, needing to move, to think. The city felt different at street level, louder, more chaotic, more alive. People rushed past with purpose, heading home to families, to dinners, to lives that existed beyond work. Nathan found himself walking towards Riverside Café without consciously deciding to go there. When he arrived at 7, he took his usual seat by the window. The place was busier than during late nights, filled with students and couples and people meeting friends. He felt conspicuous in his suit, overdressed for the casual atmosphere. Claire was not working yet. A younger man served him coffee, efficient but impersonal. He drank it slowly, watching the door. She arrived at 8, rushing in with her bag and jacket. Through the window, Nathan had seen her running down the street, clearly late. She disappeared into the back, emerging minutes later in her cafe uniform, tying her apron as she moved. She looked exhausted, more so than last night. As she moved around the room, taking orders and clearing tables, Nathan observed her carefully. The way she listened intently to each customer, the gentle patience in her voice, the small kindnesses she offered without expecting anything in return. When she finally reached his table, recognition flickered across her face. "You came back." "I did," said Nathan simply. Claire wiped down the table beside his, buying herself a moment. "I wanted to apologize again for last night. That was out of line." "It was honest," Nathan replied. "Honesty is rare." She met his eyes then, really looked at him. Something unspoken passed between them, understanding perhaps, or recognition of shared loneliness. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan found himself saying. Claire nodded cautiously. "When you said you just survive now, one day at a time, do you ever think about what comes after surviving? About actually living again?" The question seemed to catch Claire off guard. Her expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something sad and thoughtful. "Every day," she admitted softly, "but survival takes all my energy right now. My daughter needs stability. Living is a luxury I cannot afford yet." She said it without self-pity, just stating facts, but Nathan heard the grief underneath, the dreams she had set aside. "What if someone helped?" The words came out before Nathan fully considered them. "I appreciate the thought, but I do not take charity. Everything I have, I earned." "That's not what I meant," Nathan said quickly, although he wasn't entirely sure what he meant. He just knew that something about this woman, about her strength and her struggle, had awakened something in him, a desire to do something meaningful for once, instead of just profitable. Claire studied him with those sharp, knowing eyes. Then she gave him a small, sad smile. "You are searching too, aren't you? Just like Thomas was. Just like you were last night." Nathan had no answer. She was right. "Be careful," Claire said gently. "Sometimes we search so hard for meaning that we miss what's right in front of us." She moved away to help another customer, leaving Nathan alone with his thoughts and his cooling coffee. Outside, the city continued its endless motion. Inside, Nathan sat very still, feeling the weight of her words settle into his bones. For the first time in years, he understood that he was not tired from working too much. He was tired from living too little.
3 weeks passed like water through cupped hands. Nathan found himself at Riverside Café every night Claire worked, always at the same table, always with the same untouched coffee growing cold. They spoke in fragments between her duties, brief exchanges that somehow meant more than the lengthy business negotiations that filled his days. He learned about Sophie, about the drawings she made at school, about her dream of becoming a veterinarian. He learned that Claire had been 2 semesters away from her nursing degree when Thomas died. He learned that she sang while she worked, so quietly only those paying close attention could hear it. Claire learned things too, though Nathan shared less freely. She learned that success had not brought him peace, that his achievements felt hollow without someone to share them with, that he could not remember the last time he had laughed genuinely or slept without medication. But it was what they did not say that mattered most, the comfortable silences, the way their eyes met across the cafe with understanding, the way Nathan's shoulders relaxed when she sat briefly at his table during slower moments, the way Claire's smile reached her eyes when she saw him waiting by the window. On a Thursday evening in late November, everything changed. Nathan arrived at the cafe at his usual time to find it unusually quiet. Only 2 other customers occupied tables in the corner. Claire was not behind the counter. The older manager, Gerald, worked alone, his movements hurried and stressed. "Is Claire working tonight?" Nathan asked, approaching the counter. Gerald looked up, recognition crossing his face. Nathan had become a fixture here, impossible not to notice. She called in, first time in 2 years, said it was an emergency with her daughter. Alarm shot through Nathan's chest. "Is Sophie all right?" Did not say, just that she could not make it. Gerald shook his head. "Hate to lose her for the shift, but family comes first." Nathan stood frozen for a moment, then made a decision. "Do you have her address? I want to make sure everything is okay." Gerald hesitated, protective of his employee's privacy, but something in Nathan's expression, the genuine concern there, made him relent. He scribbled an address on a napkin and slid it across the counter. "Do not make me regret this." "You will not," Nathan promised. 20 minutes later, he stood outside a weathered apartment building in a neighborhood his GPS had marked as high crime. The entrance door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. Graffiti marked the walls. A flickering light barely illuminated the narrow hallway. Nathan climbed 3 flights of stairs, the smell of cooking and decay mixing in the stairwell. He
He found apartment 3C and knocked gently. Silence. Then soft footsteps. The door opened just enough for Claire to peer through the gap, her eyes widening when she recognized him. "Nathan? What are you doing here?" "Gerald told me you had an emergency. I wanted to make sure you were okay." Claire's face crumpled slightly before she caught herself. She opened the door wider, and Nathan saw the exhaustion carved into every line of her body. She had been crying, her eyes red and swollen. "It is Sophie," she said, her voice breaking. "She's been running a fever for 2 days. Tonight, it spiked to 104. I took her to the emergency room, but without insurance, they want $3,000 up front before they will admit her. I have $800 saved. That's all I have." The words tumbled out in a rush, fear and frustration mixing together. She could see her fighting to maintain control, to not completely break down in front of him. "Where is she now?" he asked calmly. "Still at the hospital. Mrs. Chen is sitting with her in the waiting room. They gave her something to bring the fever down temporarily, but they said she needs antibiotics, possibly more. They think it might be pneumonia." Claire's hands trembled as she spoke. "I've been calling everyone I know, trying to borrow money. Nobody has it. I don't know what to do." Nathan pulled out his phone. "Which hospital?" "St. Catherine's. But, Nathan, I cannot ask you to—" "You are not asking. I'm offering." He was already dialing. "This is Nathan Pierce. I need to speak with the billing department at St. Catherine's Hospital immediately." Claire watched in stunned silence as Nathan spoke with swift authority, the same voice he used to command boardrooms. Within 5 minutes, he had arranged full payment for Sophie's treatment, including admission if necessary. He provided his personal credit card information and explicit instructions that Claire Bennett and her daughter were to receive whatever care they needed without delay. When he ended the call, Claire was staring at him with tears streaming down her face. "I will pay you back," she whispered. "I don't know how long it will take, but I will pay back every penny." Nathan shook his head gently. "This is not a loan. Consider it a gift." "I can't accept that. It's too much." "Then consider it repayment," Nathan said softly. 3 weeks ago, you told me I looked like your husband before he passed. Those words woke me up, Claire. I've been sleepwalking through life, building wealth I don't need, chasing success that means nothing. You reminded me what matters. Let me do this, please." Claire covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Nathan stepped forward instinctively and wrapped his arms around her. She collapsed against him, finally allowing herself to break down. All the exhaustion, all the fear, all the months of holding herself together alone came pouring out. "I'm so tired," she sobbed into his shoulder. "I'm so tired of doing this alone." "You are not alone anymore," Nathan said quietly, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Not if you don't want to be." They stood like that for several minutes, two people who had been carrying too much weight finally allowing themselves to lean on someone else. When Claire finally pulled back, wiping her eyes, Nathan offered her a gentle smile. "Let me drive you to the hospital. You should be with Sophie." Claire nodded, grabbing her jacket with shaking hands. As they left the apartment, she glanced back at him. "Why are you doing this? You barely know me." Nathan considered the question as they descended the stairs. "Because you saw me when I was invisible. Because you spoke truth when everyone else told me what I wanted to hear. Because helping you feels